Excited to welcome back to the program the co-founder of RootsAction.org and national coordinator for the 2016 Bernie Delegates Network and coordinator for the 2020 as well, Norman Solomon. Welcome back to the program.
Hi, thanks, John.
Glad to have you here. Hoping to, hear a little bit about the strategy going forward that can perhaps provide a little bit of optimism. But I know that you, as I said, you're the coordinator for the relaunched Bernie Delegates Network, launched just a little bit more than a month ago, or 2 months ago, I guess, at this point. So tell me a little bit about the launch, the goal of the group, sort of the mission going forward.
Well, the history is in 2016, independently, a lot of Bernie delegates coalesced around the network. We were active at the convention before it and really raising issues. For instance, we had a one delegate, one vote survey, and we punched up that Medicare for All back in 2016 was tops in terms of concerns, as well as stopping the corporate-friendly trade pact TPP. In the 2019, we relaunched, anticipating what was coming up. RootsAction.org, together with Progressive Democrats of America and Our Revolution, began it well over a year ago. And now we've launched, those three organizations have relaunched a 2020 Bernie Delegates Network. What's it all about? Well, we need independent voices. We need voices that are willing and able to speak out, not only at the convention, but before and after, who really represent grassroots support for Bernie. And, as it said, you can suspend a campaign, but not the movements behind it.
Exactly. And we're assuming that, by the time all's said and done, he's going to have a significant number of delegates that theoretically could push for these sorts of changes, right?
Yeah, as we speak, there are, more than a dozen primaries still to go. And it's a sort of unusual situation where Bernie suspended his campaign. He said he was still seeking delegates. And the reality is that there are grassroots groups that are carrying it forward, certainly more than the campaign itself. Our Revolution, Roots Action, Progressive Democrats of America, a new group that is called Once Again PAC that I'm part of, and Roots Action, as well as PDA is part of, a group called People for Bernie. Well, it's all a bunch of groups, but what it really comes down to is grassroots insistence that we can get a lot more delegates, that it's meaningful for people to vote for Bernie against the neoliberal policies that Biden represents. And we've seen that happen. John, just in the last week or so, Oregon, about 20% voting for Bernie. Mm-hmm. Hawaii, more than 1/3, close to 40% voting for Bernie just last week rather than voting for Biden. And it's sort of extraordinary. Here you have Bernie, who has bowed out of the race, essentially, endorsed his opponent, and yet you have almost 2 out of 5 voters in Hawaii saying we still are voting for Bernie.
Yeah, and look, I can say personally, I'm in California, so I was able to vote for Bernie in California. If as typically the case, California had happened later in the primary schedule, I still would have voted for Bernie. I think many people see it as not only their right to do that, but sort of a privilege of having supported this person for so long. In some cases, in terms of money, in terms of activism, they feel like that's what they should be able to do. And I'm glad that they can. What I'm curious about is in terms of the strategy, this time as opposed to 2016, in terms of the issues you're going to be focusing on, is there any significant difference between the two? Are there any issues where you feel like less pressure is needed, that perhaps Biden is likely to be better on these issues, or is it still largely a similar sort of platform that'll be pushed for?
Well, the personalities are different. It's hard to see any programmatic major differences between Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden, sorry to say. I think the dynamics, of course, are different. We have fewer delegates, but at the same time, and I should have mentioned, because of the votes that are still coming in for Bernie, we're going to get over a crucial threshold, which according to the DNC rules, if you have over 25% of the total delegates, you can push resolutions to the floor. And that also goes to party rules. And I should emphasize, John, that really it's because of activism from the grassroots and really anger that we didn't have this nonsense of superdelegates rearing its ugly head throughout the last year and a half. Back 2015-16, we had crawls across the bottom of cable TV. Hillary Clinton was ahead by hundreds of delegates, which is to say superdelegates, before a single vote had been cast in Iowa or New Hampshire or anywhere else.
Yeah.
That didn't happen this time. only because people raised hell in 2017 and 18 and got some reforms so that the media and everybody knew on the first ballot superdelegates were irrelevant. Well, that's not baked into the cake permanently. It's not in the charter. So we're going to have to fight to make sure that we don't have a resurgence of superdelegate power. We're also going to have to fight for Medicare for all, for a Green New Deal, for ending all student debt, for ending the wars. And obviously that's not where Biden's at. But I should say that really, we've got to defeat Trump. That's part of the underlying reality. And right now we should be pressuring as well to not have a neoliberal vice president. I mean, Jesse Jackson said it very well at the 1988 Democratic Party convention. He said, it takes two wings to fly. And a lot of the neoliberals who are running the Biden campaign seem to think you can fly with two right wings of the party. It's just going to crash and burn unless we see, for one thing, a decent VP person on the ticket. The only one being touted, who I would call decent, is Elizabeth Warren. So this is a fight that needs to be waged, and the more pressure we can bring to bear through the delegates and other ways, the better.
Are there any other names that are not currently being looked at that you think would fill that role well?
Oh, there's a lot. You know, Ro Khanna, Bernie Sanders himself, Barbara Lee. When you look at what's touted as even anywhere in the ballpark, unfortunately, none of those folks or of their quality are in there. And, you know, Elizabeth Warren at least is hated by Wall Street for good reasons. And so she would begin to balance the ticket, especially because, let's face it, it's not only his age, but his mental condition indicates that at most Biden would be a one-term president, if that.
Mm-hmm. You know, and I'm also curious, especially since you're involved right now and you were in 2016 as well, there's certainly the possibility that we will not have a physical convention. I know that Trump is pushing for one. He wants to just pretend that, you know, it's 1960 or whatever. But there's entirely a chance that this might be purely virtual. Does that change the way that you're organizing or the way that certain resolutions will be pushed in any significant way?
Well, it really empowers, in a sense, a lot of organizations that are largely reliant on and have strengths online. And that's certainly true of Our Revolution, it's true of Roots Action, other groups that want to bring pressure and organizing to bear. I think it would be completely irresponsible for the DNC to try to put 50,000 or 10,000 people in a modified arena. And all the public health indices tell us that that would just cause a lot of suffering and death as a result. And there's got to be a lot of insistence on the Democratic Party that it not try to sort of play a game of pandemic chicken with the unhinged Trump Republican Party and try to match them in terms of some kind of on-the-ground extravaganza. But ultimately, it comes down to organizing. And if we don't have something in Milwaukee, the same imperatives apply. We just cannot fold up our tent at any point in this current history in real time. We've got to insist that these issues be fought for and fought for across the board.
Yeah. And a worst case scenario would seeing these delegates, including the Bernie delegates, being exposed to harm simply to be able to show up. It looks like at this point, while Biden took a little while to seem to take the pandemic's effect on the ability to organize seriously, that lagged a bit. He does seem to be taking it seriously now, and so I hope that he will not be pushing for some sort of unnecessary and ahead of its time push for that sort of thing. But I want to thank you for joining us and laying out the strategy going forward. Hopefully we can talk again as you've coordinated with more delegates before the convention starts and see how that's going to shake out in real time. And so Norman Solomon, thank you as always for what you're doing, and I appreciate you joining us today.
Thanks a lot, John.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.